We'll call to order. We'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. In an open forum in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, members of the commission shall not discuss, deliberate, or make any decisions on topics not posted as an agenda item. Speakers should address all remarks to the commission and limit your remarks to no more than 3 minutes. And when you do come up and speak, please state your name and address for the record. Moving on to the consent agenda, approval of minutes for the Planning and Zoning Commission held on September the 8th, 2025. We'll entertain a motion when ready. And here's. We're at minutes. Approval of minutes. We'll give you a second to catch up with you. Just.
You're good.
Yeah. You're good. We're just waiting, entertaining a motion on 4A minutes. Planning zone.
Do you want it to be for the whole consent agenda or just the minutes?
No, just for, we'll need to go by one by one.
Oh, okay. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say same. Okay, moving on to 4B, approval of an extension to the expiration of subdivision case SD 2025-12 regarding a preliminary plat for the Majestic Oaks subdivision consisting of approximately 25.35 acres located on the east side of US 259, approximately 1 mile north of US 59 in Nacogdoches. And entertain a motion to approve when ready.
I make a motion to approve.
All those in favor say aye.
Second.
Oh, yep, second, sorry.
I second.
No, sorry, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say same. Okay. Moving on to regular agenda 5A, public hearing. Consider and make a recommendation concerning an ordinance of the City of Nacogdoches, Texas, amending Chapter 35, Environment, Article 5, Noise and Vibrations, and Chapter 118, Zoning, Article 7, Performance Standards of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Nacogdoches, Texas, providing a severability clause, providing a continuation clause, providing a repeal clause, and providing an effective date. Mr. City Attorney.
Chairman, members of the Commission, Jerry Baker, City Attorney. Bringing before you tonight a proposed ordinance to amend our.
Take the mics off, Jerry. Looks.
Hear me now?
No.
Yeah, it does. Transfer now.
Okay, we'll do this. Again, Jerry Baker, City Attorney. Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think I'm cutting in and out still. Anyway, come before you this evening to bring you a proposed amendment to our noise ordinance. The purpose of the amendment, as you can see before you, is because currently our noise ordinance is kind of divided. It's found in both Chapter 34 and Chapter 118 of our Code of Ordinances, which has led to some uncertainty and regarding. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Concerning enforcement, and so as in discussions with the police department and others regarding
Sorry, Jerry.
Do we want to try to fix it?
Here, let me sit down with my mic here.
Yeah, let's do that.
Sorry about that.
I know you're having, it's a distraction to present that way.
That's okay. I'll just sit right here. This okay?
We'll deputize everybody that comes forward after you as the city attorney. I think that's
Okay.
key.
So,
There you go.
can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as you can see before you, so as I mentioned, our current ordinance is really divided between Chapter 34 and Chapter 118. And as we were reviewing this with code enforcement and members of the police department, it really came to the forefront that a lot of the those enforcing these ordinances didn't realize there was anything in Chapter 118. And because the fact that's in part of the zoning ordinance, I mean, that wouldn't be something that they would regularly review and observe in doing any kind of enforcement mechanism. So after meeting with members of NPD for over several months and discussing it amongst staff, we really came to the conclusion we really need to consolidate all these regulations where it makes sense under Chapter 34. And so, and that would entail removing sections 118, 504, and 507 from Chapter 118. And so really the purpose of bringing this before this committee is because part of those sections clearly fall in the zoning ordinance. And of course, as you know, that any amendments to the zoning ordinance requires recommendation from planning and zoning. And so that's really the intent of my request tonight, is just a request for a recommendation to present this, to allow this to go to council for approval. Just to let you know, those proposed amendments would also include clarification and updating the language in Chapter 34 for such things as use of sound equipment in vehicles, sound equipment in residential and business locations, just to clear up some of the language regarding the presumptions that were already stated, and also some of the affirmative defenses. And so we just wanted to update some of that language and really, again, consolidate some of the enforcement language that was in 118 and eliminate those two sections. So if you look in your packet, you probably see a bunch of red lines. And the last two sections of that are from 118, and as you can see, they're entirely knocked out. So that's all I have. I'll answer any questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, sir. And we'll open up for public comment. Would anyone like to speak on this? Okay, we'll close it for public comment and open it up for discussion.
I've got several questions as always. So Jerry, can you tell me in terms of if we were to actually remove this altogether from 118, if we have industrial zones versus residential zones, how this would affect it? Because we're striking out all decibels. How will that affect our zoning in terms of industrial versus residential, or any type of businesses that we need to make decisions on? And then, sorry.
So as far as enforcement of a noise violation,
Correct. If we're measuring it by decibels, so let's say an industrial zone is actually higher than the threshold, we won't have actual quantitative numbers to measure that by. And also, if we're going to actually give this to NPD to enforce, would we actually have an ordinance person come through to do something in terms of my question that I just asked?
so what kind of violations are you talking about,
Well,
for example?
Well,
I
like
mean,
a special use permit, something that has a noise violation after certain hours that we're voting for, or industrial, if there's going to be a threshold of mechanical equipment past a certain time.
well, there are sections in Chapter 34 that call for enforcement for certain time periods. I would refer you under, if you look under Section 34-152, it lists out several of the violations, including construction and repairing of buildings, that's subsection 10. Pile drivers and hammers, that's subsection 7. Loading, unloading boxes, subsection 6. Operation of sound equipment, subsection 2. So those particular sections would probably deal with the vast majority of most of those kind of violations. Again, we're not looking at necessarily imposing a particular sound limit requirement for particular zones. But really more of an enforcement of any kind of violations for anything irrespective of where it may be located, whether we're talking about residential, industrial, commercial, et cetera.
Okay,
Does that answer your question?
yes.
Okay.
Jerry, I do have a question. So on our packet, it says page 16 of 73, specifically section 34-156, under presumptions. So am I reading this right, that we're changing it from that the person that is using or operating the equipment being the one that we presume is in, I don't want to say in trouble, but maybe, to where it's the property owner? So if I'm a property owner, I have an event on my property and somebody's out there acting less than desirable, the presumption is that it is my problem to handle.
Correct.
But what we currently have in place is that it's the person that's acting a little bit wild.
Well, it's real. The language was really unclear. If you read through the struck out language, and the presumption, talks about using and operating an animal, to a device, and actually manipulates or operates without even defining what that means. And so the intent was really to kind of clarify that we're really looking at the actual where the sound violation is occurring.
Okay.
And so there's a presumption, at least, not that you can't rebut that presumption. So if you look under subsection C, there's the ability to rebut that presumption if you present sufficient evidence that maybe you have a renter or something that's in violation of the lease, and you can show that they were the ones that actually violated or caused the sound, the noise violation.
Gotcha. So if Lily has a Airbnb and they go out there and act crazy,
Correct.
it's presumed it's her fault, even though she's away at home. But then through the rebuttal process, she can prove that it was the people at the Airbnb.
She can present that evidence. So for example, she can show that, for a short-term lease or a rental of that property, and that this is the person that was actually using the property at that time, and that they're the ones, we weren't present, they were there that weekend, and can present that evidence to overcome a presumption. Again, it's just a presumption.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not saying that isn't necessarily going to, automatically be a violation. Any kind of violation, you might be cited for something, but it still has to be prosecuted.
Gotcha.
In most likely scenario, if it's a loud noise complaint, they're not going to pursue it under this. They're going to pursue it under a breach of peace, disorderly conduct as a law enforcement officer,
Well-
which they could cite the person they're actually causing the disturbance.
They can.
Yeah.
Clearly.
And this would all be taken away from the zoning enforcement into,
Chapter
PD.
34, correct.
okay,
So, to your question about section 118, those sections have to do with measurement device, sound pressure meter. Over in section 34, it just says if it's audible.
Plainly audible, correct. It's still an objective standard.
very objective.
What's that?
I said it's very objective.
So if somebody were to complain, and an officer comes and they can't hear it, how do we?
So there's a certain requirement. So if you're talking about a sound, a noise violation from, let's say, sound equipment that's being operated at a party or something like that. So under with the proposed amendment, if that officer can plainly hear that sound equipment being operated within a building within 100 feet, there's a violation there. That person can be cited, whoever's operating, whether it's the owner or maybe a renter or whatever it may be. Okay, I lost my train of thought. What was your question again? Say that again.
Just talking about in section 118, using a sound pressure meter.
Sure.
Some kind of device that says.
Measure
you're in-
audibles, the
Yeah,
decibels.
you're
Right.
in violation
And there was-
versus someone's perception that may be different from me to you. I wear hearing aids, and so if I showed up and, my hearing aids were adjusted as such, and I didn't hear it, is it, at what point is it subjective and, I guess defensible?
So the standard that we have in the proposed amendment is an objective standard, okay? And it's recognized by many courts of law to be an objective standard. Now, you're talking about measurement by a noise, meter, right? And, decimal meter, yeah. And, we've had some discussions with NPD, and in fact, NPD purchased a decimal meter and went out and let me back up. Okay, recall that we had this discussion with the city council through a workshop probably about 6 or 7 months ago. You may or may not be aware of that, but part of that discussion, there was really a lot of questions from the council whether or not, because we were talking about whether or not just to move all the decimal meters into 34, the decimal meter readings, and whether or not they were enforceable or not. So NPD took it upon themselves. They purchased a decimal meter and went out and just conducted a bunch of tests. And there's really a lot of questions when they came back as to whether or not these were even accurate, if they could be enforced. And so because of that question mark, it was just really determined that probably the best course was to really just not carry those over. And just to use the objective standard that we have for you. So that was really the conclusion that was reached after that study.
I see it being cumbersome having every law enforcement officer or every code person having to have a meter. Where do you stand? Where's the threshold? Yeah, there's so many questions, and I think the objectivity to it of being able to capture it. Now, you'd hope common sense would be applied. I will say this in the law enforcement capacity, 99.9% of the time, if it's loud, it's loud. You tell them, hey, it's a little loud, turn it down, and things are turned down. Outside of industrial, that would be a separate, but relative to loud music and.
So, yeah, and NVD made that point very clear at the workshop that, their first reaction to any kind of noise complaint, like a party or something to that effect, is to go out and say, hey, this complaint's been made, please turn down the music. And 90% of the time, that takes care of the issue. It's only when it's repeated or ignored that really you have any kind of enforcement action. So, but again, going back to your question though, there's a lot of uncertainty still about whether, again, the accuracy of those. There's a lot of factors that go into that. And so it was just determined that it from an objective standpoint, it's probably not any more enforceable than what we have right here. So why make that more complicated? A good defense attorney who's defending, a violation can raise as many questions when you have a decimal meter as they can when you have this kind of objective standard.
And is your concern the actual issuance of a citation or the fact that I need to turn down my?
Yeah, the issuance of a citation.
Right.
Yeah, how is it defensible in a court, if they're saying, well, it's subjective?
But I guess my question would be then, so for us as the zoning people, that's really not our concern.
And that was really what prompted the question, why is this located here? Does it really need to be in the zoning ordinance itself?
Well, I think it does for some areas like industrial zones to actually enforce, noise violations.
Well, you're enforcing the violation.
Right, but to what standard?
But you're talking about putting it in a zone, if you're approving a zone change or an SUP or something like that.
Right.
How do you make those determinations at that point, whether it's part of your zone application, whatever kind of zoning application you'd be talking about? If you're talking about violations itself, those can be enforced under Chapter 34.
Absolutely. But striking out, if we are looking at industrial zones and looking at noise standards of what's operable at an industrial zone, I do believe that can be enforced if you do have the numbers actually on the quantitative measure for a certain type of range, like heavy equipment that does operate at a certain time. We're striking out nighttime noise, impulsive noise, ambient noise levels. I do believe that we should really consider that.
Well, yeah, and what I'm saying is that can be enforced under Chapter 34.
Right. Are you striking it out of the zoning of 113 and putting all of that? 118 and putting it all in 34.
So the enforcement of those things that are stated in 118 are enforceable under 34.
Absent the scale.
Yeah, not as clearly
Correct.
defined, really.
Not as clearly. Can we define industrial? I mean, within chapter 34?
As far as what?
Well, putting back the decibel ranges for industrial zones, nighttime noise.
Oh, hey, so under section 2, operation of sound equipment on page 14, it does go out to give more specifics, I guess, for our question about like industrial or maybe even construction, under subsection 10, where it talks about constructions and repair buildings.
Right, that's what we had pointed out earlier for 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekdays. Let me look and see in here.
So, and subsection 7 talks about pile drivers, hammers, et cetera.
Right.
Those kind of things that would cause those kind of industrial sound, you know, potential noise violations.
Okay.
Does any of this come into play, like with the brewery butting up to residential and stuff like that?
As far as operation of sound equipment, yeah, well, if there's any kind of violation, potentially yes. Now, I will tell you that the legislature has recently passed some limitations on how much a city can enforce any type of time restrictions and DBA restrictions on restaurants and those kind of things in this recent legislative session. So we do have to be cautious on that based on that legislative change. Sure.
Good question, how they have outdoor music, so obviously you can hear it within 100
Right.
feet.
Right.
But that's irrespective of this, that's
Well, I
existence
mean,
today, if someone called in and.
correct.
Yeah.
So I also have another question. Of all the ordinance changes on this one, why was this one presented this evening? Why was this one chosen out of all the ordinances to be presented for this evening?
As far as, I'm sorry, I don't
Well, we have
understand
so
the
many
question.
ordinances that we're looking to actually recommend or change. So I wanted to know why this one in particular was represented this evening.
Because it involved chapter 118, and so we needed a recommendation from P&Z in order to present that to council.
Is there anything else coming out from 118 that we're looking at changing altogether?
Not in this current ordinance, no.
Okay. Are we going to be, I guess, my question to you is, are we putting it in ordinances for recommendations to change for city council to look at and review every single planning and zoning meeting that we're in?
I believe we're just doing this one because it's in 118.
Right.
And so we wanted to present it to the commission to get your recommendation.
By our code, we have to present it through P&Z
Sure,
because it is a zoning
Because it's a
amendment.
zoning issue.
I can speak to that, Commissioners. Mike New, Executive Director.
That mic's not working, Mike.
That's right.
Thank
you. Mike New, Executive Director of Development and Infrastructure. To your point about other ordinance amendments being presented, that's very much a discussion of our zoning subcommittee. So the other ordinances that right now, we don't have an update because we didn't have a subcommittee meeting since the last P&Z meeting. But the other topics, range of topics that we're looking at is off-street parking, potentially tree preservation, fences. We've still got to cover, we haven't touched the subject yet, but evaluation of plan developments and what our scope would be if it changes within the zoning ordinance. So there's a number of other topics that will come before P&Z when the subcommittee has kind of discussed those and fleshed out some of the details.
Right. So we haven't met in 2 months for the subcommittee, correct?
Not since August 27th.
Right. So that's why I'm wondering why this one came to us tonight.
This one is a strike. This is more of a conversation among our attorney and PD about evaluating the noise ordinance. It's not really a change to anything within the zoning ordinance. It's just removing that language so that it applies to Chapter 34.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for it?
So we're gonna move it to 34. We're gonna scratch the numbers off of it and make it subjective. That's basically the
We're removing it altogether from chapter 118, which is for zoning,
234.
to 34, which would be enforceable by NPD, all of it. And we would not have this in our zoning.
Code enforcement and NPD
Co-
could
Yeah,
enforce.
code enforcement.
Yeah. So it's still an objective standard.
You know, there's just things in here like no use in district subject to the article shall at any time create earthborne vibration, which when measured at the boundary property line of the source operation exceeds the limit of the following displacement. So earthborne vibration, are you putting that into pile drivers, hammers, heavy equipment, all sorts of things? Is that gonna be definable under that in chapter 34?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
You good? Do you have any other questions?
No, not specifically.
Okay. Is there anything else? Anyone else have any questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion when ready. I'll make a motion to approve as presented. I have a second. I'll call no second.
I make a motion to just table it until next time then, because we need to look over this a little bit more.
Okay.
Does anybody second that one?
Speak,
You say?
I second.
just say a little bit louder if you don't mind.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say same. Aye. So 4, 1 against. Me.
Commissioners, can you give staff some guidance on what you'd like for us to look at? And do you want to table it to the next available meeting?
Yeah, we can table it to the next available meeting. I just think we need to review it a little bit more.
Do you want a side by side? What would be
I mean,
helpful?
Yeah, side by side would be great, but striking out some of these things where I feel like the quantitative measures for vibration standards, I feel like we need those in place, you know, if something's gonna bore into the earth, and there's a violation on it, I wanna be able to actually have that be justifiable in court.
But
If some type of, what?
Well, I was gonna say, can I still ask y'all questions? Are we at that point in life, or?
Just for this is going to help us
Just asking
prepare the next, prepare the
I guess
next time.
my clarifying question then would be on this. So everything under, what is this, 118, right? Is that the one? Yep, 118, which is the zoning piece. That doesn't necessarily deal with any type of enforcement as much as it is giving us a metric for when we're issuing things like a specific or a special use permit, like what?
But that's one of the questions, because the location of it was a real question in the first place. Why it was placed in 118, and not under 34.
Because that would be my main question is, so like, because I hear what we're saying, like it's nice to have numbers, makes it, the quantitative piece is good, but I guess within whatever authority is vested in chapter 118, how much of that is actually, like, if we're sending the police officer out there, he's not citing 118, he's not even looking at 118, because 118 is simply for the purpose of zoning. So,
And that was the issue that NPD, based on my conversations with NPD, was that nobody was even aware, your regular officers are not even aware of 118 in the first place. So
Have we
they're
had-
looking at chapter 34 or from the penal code with regards to any kind of
because chapter 34 is
disorderly
enforcement,
conduct.
right?
Correct.
So then, with these data tables, what exactly do they apply to?
We've already closed it for this, so let's give guidance of what we want to hear next time. And the guidance can be, why are we making changes on this? So we're just shifting it to 34. The guidance you want to hear about the tables further.
Yeah, I think that would help give us some clarity on some things.
Sure. And I would be happy to invite NPD to come to the meeting next time so they can explain kind of their, I guess, view of this too. So.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you would like city to plan for the next meeting? I guess we could also email you.
Yes, absolutely. You
Like
can
so.
email staff if you have some very specific follow-up questions. I think we have a general sense of what the commission may be looking for as far as ensuring that we're drawing that comparison with what is and what is not applicable or what would not be applicable to the zoning chapter. So,
Correct.
Does this
Okay.
create any issue kicking it to the next meeting with answering this?
no, all this does procedurally is this will delay our presentation of this item to the council. P&Z will consider it as they have tonight. And then we may do some other meetings or ask some other questions among commissioners. If we need some additional clarification, we'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on to 5B, hearing, discuss, and consider action on zone change case ZON 2025-12 regarding a zone change from A, agricultural, to B2, general business district, on 2 parcels of a land approximately 3.04 acres in size, more particularly described by the Nacogdoches Central Appraisal District parcels 10,000, 16,787, and 81263, and generally located north and south of 200 Northeast Stallings Drive, Nacogdoches, Texas. Mr. City Planner.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners, Juan Paulette, City Planner. So these properties are located north and south of Regents Academy campus and are outside the city limits. They currently do not have a zoning designation, but upon annexation, will automatically be zoned agricultural. An annexation request is scheduled to be heard by City Council next Tuesday, the 21st, and approval of the zoning case is contingent upon approval of the annexation request. By doing it this way, by having the commission hear it prior to City Council, just kind of speeds up the process instead of having to wait another month after City Council makes a decision. So these parcels are adjacent to commercial development along Northeast Stallings Drive, consistent of local and general business zoning districts. The requested B2 zoning will align the existing zoning of the Regents Academy campus and surrounding developments along Stallings Drive. The future land use plan designates the subject properties as rural development. This future land use category is described as sparsely populated areas with limited development, also includes areas that are gradually transitioning into urban uses and development. Although the requested B2 zoning represents a variation from the rural development designation, the subject parcels are located along a commercial corridor that has developed with a mixture of commercial and institutional uses. Staff believes that this request is compatible with the comprehensive plans guide and intent to transition areas into appropriate urban uses. This is a picture of the Regents Academy campus. And then a picture of the north and south parcels that are proposing to be zone changed. This slide shows the types of uses within a 200-foot notification area. Staff sent out 5 public meeting notices to property owners within 500 feet. Staff has not received any notices either for or against this proposal. Staff coordinated a neighborhood meeting at the Recreation Center on behalf of the applicant, and none of the neighboring residents attended the meeting. Oops. Staff believes this request meets the conditions for approval as stated in the staff report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, sir. And we'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone that'd like to speak on this? Okay, we'll close it to public comment, open up for commission discussion, if there are any questions. If no questions, we'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say same. And moving on to 5C, public hearing, discuss and consider action on zoning case PD 2025-02 regarding an amendment to the Kenbrook North Townhouse Subdivision Zone Plan Development for two parcels of land approximately .18 acres in size for the construction of one single-family residence. The subject property is more particularly described as Nacogdoches Central Appraisal District parcels 85345 and 85344 and located at 1723 and 1725 Mulroney Drive, Nacogdoches, Texas. Mr. City Planner.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioners, Juan Paulette, City Planner. So the subject properties are located in the Kenbrook residential neighborhood on the north side of Mulroney, just west of the Nacogdoches High School. The properties are located within a planned development that was originally approved for townhomes in 1979. The surrounding zoning and land uses are single-family residential with no undeveloped adjacent lots remaining. The future land use plan designates the subject property as single-family residential. Staff believes that future land use designation of the property is consistent with the proposed zoning and aligns the existing residential development patterns with the area. The proposed home will be single-story, three-bedroom residence, and approximately 1,800 square feet. This is the proposed site plan combining the two remaining lots, and the home will follow the same building setbacks and be designed to blend in with the existing townhomes. And this is a picture of the subject property. The picture on the right, you can see the three newly constructed or recently constructed townhomes that the applicant has constructed. And this slide shows the types of uses within the 200-foot notification area. Staff sent out 27 public meeting notices to those property owners and 29 postcards to property owners within 200 and 500 feet. Staff has not received any responses in favor or in opposition of the request, and staff coordinated a neighborhood meeting at the City Council chambers on behalf of the applicant. 6 neighboring residents attended the meeting with general questions, and all were in favor of the request. And staff believes this request meets the conditions for approval, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after the public hearing.
Okay. We'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone that'd like to speak on this? Glenda, Dennis, nothing? You all good? All right. Okay, we'll close it for public comment. Open it up for discussion here. There's a house, residential house, if you're looking at this lot, there's a house to the right and then a townhome to the left, or they're, just out of curiosity. I run by it all the time, but I should.
I think they're all townhomes.
They're all townhomes,
Even
even
to
the
the
one on
right.
the corner?
The one on the corner is a townhome.
This whole planned development area is townhomes.
Okay, okay.
A question for you, Juan. Were there any restrictions on the PD at all that they have to abide by from 1979?
They're just setback restrictions,
Okay.
40 feet from the front.
Right. Nothing crazy that they
Nothing-
had
no,
to
nothing.
adhere to, because if they did and something happened,
Yeah,
that's
no.
what I would be concerned about.
Yeah, I don't think it says that they have to build it with asbestos or anything.
Yeah, we don't want them to be locked into anything with their single-family home.
It's a pretty house.
It is.
They're all gonna live here, not that that matters, but probably not. That's beautiful. Cool. That's my questions.
Okay.
So nothing like HOA, right? Making sure.
No.
Okay, we're good.
If no other discussion, we'll open it up for, or hear a recommendation, a motion, please.
I make a motion to approve the, good Lord, I'm having a brain fart.
That's okay.
To
I have
approve-
one every time.
Lily, finish it out for me.
To add the single-family home to the PD for townhomes.
Bingo.
And I would second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say same. Okay.
The only reason I didn't do it first is I was doing the same thing. going,
I was trying to read
"How
through
about
that. I was like,
this?"
what are we doing?
Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate that. And moving on to 5D, the highly anticipated presentation on the floodplain management ordinance. Case.
You can do this.
Not gonna bother me.
Now Jerry can't see.
I'm gonna have to
I'm good.
back up and sit away, because I can't stand sitting with my back to people. So, okay. Get comfy here. Good evening, councilmen?
Commissioners.
I'm so used to
serve the
council, sorry. Commissioners and chairman. Case Opperman, Director of Public Works and City Engineer. Can y'all still hear me this far away? Hopefully.
We can, I don't know if it's recording appropriately.
Okay.
We got a
surely that's
thumbs up
close
from
enough.
Mike, so I think you're good.
So, yes, we wanted to talk just briefly tonight, hopefully briefly. I'll try to manage my time here. Just on floodplain management and what that means in the city of Nacogdoches. Some history, some current kind of management techniques, what floodplains are, and so we'll just go through some of these things. And y'all stop me if you have any questions, but we will. I'll be happy to take questions at the end if y'all want to just save them. But we can do it however y'all want to. So, anyways, so flood management and floodplain management, I should say, in Nacogdoches, really all comes from is prompted by the Flood Control and Insurance Act through the Texas Water Code. It delegates the responsibility of floodplain managements to local governments such as the city. We've had a handful of iterations of our floodplain ordinance, earliest being in 1977. Our current version was adopted in 2010. It essentially kind of defines floodplain. It gets into what floodplain management means here in Nacogdoches. And essentially, basically outlines how we handle the floodplains and permitting and development of the floodplains here in the city of Nacogdoches. So a couple of regulatory agencies that are involved. Everybody, I think, knows who FEMA is, but we may not always know what that stands for. It's the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Created by Congress in 1977, and part of its mission is to mitigate all hazards, and that's a very simplified version of what their mission is. But it all stems from their interest in mitigating hazards, restricting things that will cause hazards. And so the National Flood Insurance Program was created in 1968, which is actually before FEMA. But FEMA does currently administer it. And so, through I think up until the 1950s, floodplain or flood insurance was handled through homeowner policies. As you can imagine, when more claims than they were comfortable with started being paid out, one of two things usually happens, rates go up or they start excluding things. Well, flood insurance started being excluded from policies, and so the National Flood Insurance Program was created kind of as a measure to allow for flood insurance for homes. So FEMA, part of what they do for their mitigating against risk is they have created these maps of flood zones across the U.S. The cities, and we'll talk about this a little more later, but they created our maps, the first ones in 1981, and we've had updated information since, well, not updated information, but we've had ancillary information that's come about since then, mainly through our detailed study, which we got in 1983, which kind of further defines how our floodplains are laid out here in Nacogdoches. So FEMA creates these flood insurance rate maps. They hand them off to the localities, and basically it guides our floodplain management, in Nacogdoches. And so, it's mostly based on, reducing risk from flood damage. Let's skip ahead here in the interest of time. So, flood frequency. You hear a lot about 100-year floodplain, and it might come as a surprise, it may not, for those of you who know something about it, but a 100-year flood does not mean that a flood happens one time every 100 years. It's a statistical probability is what the 100-year floodplain kind of designates. It's what it means is that there's a 1 in 100 chance, or 1%, of this type of event happening in any given year. So there's nothing that would say that there could not be multiple 100-year events in 1 year. It's just about the statistical probability. So we also have data for 2, 5, 10, 25, and 50, as well as 500-year frequencies as well. But what FEMA is mostly concerned about is the 100-year flood risk. So in Nacogdoches, what that means for a 24-hour period, and I'll try to spare you all the hydrology, but the intensity for that storm, the 100-year storm, is equivalent to about 10.2 inches of rain in 24 hours. So that's a 24-hour period. 10.2 inches could fall quicker than that, and that would actually, it might be that volume, but that would actually classify it as a higher year storm, so maybe 500-year. If you get 10 inches in, say, an hour, then you might be looking at a 1,000-year storm or something. So we don't see that hardly ever, knock on wood. But it's kind of fuzzy math, but that's what our frequency is basically defined as.
I think she has a
Yeah, case, the last flooding that we had that happened around here, what was that classified as?
I'm not sure that I ever heard what that was classified as, but I don't believe it was a 100-year storm. It was, maybe 25 or 50.
25
But
or 50,
yeah,
okay.
don't quote me on that because I actually never heard what the classification was.
Okay.
But I think you're referring to the 2023 flood, maybe
Yeah.
in
it
May.
was recently.
Couple years ago. Okay, so let's get into some definitions, really. And these are commonly confused. And they're kind of used interchangeably. They're not actually the same thing. Floodplain versus floodway. And here's a graphic. Some of you may have seen this before. We've used this in presentations before, but or some similar graphic. And you hear this last night? Is that what you said?
No, Shasta, she's over here like 300 words a minute.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking it up when Judge
Like, I'm gonna
Sowell
skip-
issued
I'm gonna
that
go real
emergency.
fast if y'all
Sorry
heard
about
this.
that, guys.
Yes,
The emergency
I'm
declaration.
teasing with you.
Sorry.
No, you're good. And I'm happy to, repeat or reiterate anything if y'all have any questions.
It's all good.
So the floodplain, as you can see there in the graphic, it's actually the full width of a area that is likely to flood in a 100 year. So within that is what we call the floodway, and that's kind of what we would loosely define as the flowing channel in a flood. So when we have a floodway is where we expect to see floodwaters moving. The flood fringe is basically the area between the floodway and the edge of the floodplain. That's going to be more your backwater area, kind of like we see in the intramural fields and stuff like that. Whenever Lanana gets out of its banks, that's going to be the floodplain area. And really the channel, like you see in that right-hand photo, that's Bonita Creek down here south of City Hall. That's more what we would call the floodway. So it's where the moving water is generally. And the flood fringe is that backwater area, still within the floodplain, but not the floodway. So there's a distinction between floodplain and floodway that needs to be made. So, get a little deeper into it here. How is a floodway area determined versus a flood fringe? So, when we have a flood, let me back up. When you have a flood plain, the FEMA regulations say that you can fill or quote unquote encroach on that floodway fringe area to the point where, or up to the point where it increases the water surface in the flood event by 1 foot, called the surcharge. So, put another way, you come in from the edge of the floodplain, you fill, and at the point where the water surface increases by 1 foot, that's where they delineate where the floodway is versus where the flood fringe is. So if you can visualize a pipe or a channel, when you have the same volume of water coming through it, if you squeeze it down, it's going to raise the elevation, right? Because you've got the same volume of water, but less area for it to get through, so it raises, and that's the only way it can continue to move. So when that head on that surcharge gets to 1 foot, that's where they say you have to stop filling. You can't fill anymore. That's where the floodway starts. Does that make sense? Did I make that confusing? So basically, you're allowed by the FEMA regulations to fill within the floodplain, and that's what we call floodplain development, up to that delineating point where the flood fringe becomes the floodway. Okay, and that's what we allow development in. So you can see where those green areas are. Those would be developable areas in the 100-year floodplain, as long as they're outside the floodway. So we do prohibit development within the floodway area. Again, that area that we expect for water to be flowing in a flood event. However, there are mechanisms for a property owner to prove that they are not impacting the floodway if they are able and willing to do the analyses, to hire the engineering firm or whoever to model these things on their property to prove that they are not increasing flooding levels by developing. They're able to do that, and if they can prove it to FEMA, they'll sign off on it. But generally, floodway is undevelopable with certain exceptions, which you can see them there. At grade development, which paving, driveways, parking lots generally being allowed. Small obstructions such as mailboxes or power poles. The way I kind of explain that is anything that would sort of mimic a tree in a natural floodway, because we've got trees all in the floodway. They're not impeding flow. The water flows around them. So anything generally that could, if the water hits it, it might think that's a tree, not a mailbox or not a pavilion or something. As long as it's not hanging up debris, that's what we really are concerned about, because when we hang up debris, that's what causes, flooding on the back end. And so that's what we're trying to avoid. And then, believe it or not, fences are allowed as long as they are breakaway fences. So if you have a property that goes up to the creek, you'll see them in Bonita Park. We've got fencing, down into the floodway area along Power Street. Well, those are breakaway fences. So if floodwaters hit that, they'll just lay over, and they won't hang up tree trunks or debris that's going to cause flooding down or upstream, I should say.
So this may be a dumb question, Case.
No dumb questions.
Paving or driveways at grade, so we can actually put a whole flat top in there, like the apartment complex that is on Austin and Pearl Street. When we were debating on whether to approve that, there was the zoning for the agriculture and then for the PD that was there. Is that correct, Juan? Do you remember that? And so the driveway was permitted, and paving was permitted, but there are cars on that. So if in a flood, those cars get their breakaway, not light things such as small obstructions, mailboxes, power poles, or light duty fences or anything that would be considered a tree. Why is that permissible if cars are going to be parked there?
Well, we're talking about permanent
Right.
structures, right?
Yeah, right,
So, I mean,
okay.
You would expect, it's not, development necessarily, right? But, those could be moved.
Okay.
Same as, I don't know, anything that you took into a park or something like that, a table or, you know, chairs or whatever, all those could be washed away in a, in a flood, but we don't prohibit people from taking, you know, folding tables
Sure.
out to the park. We expect those to be moved, and
Sure.
especially not to be left, you know, during a flood event. So, yeah, I mean, you could argue that, that cars could float downstream, and you'd be right.
They
But
have
We would,
on
we
Bonita.
would, we would expect, we would expect for permanent structures to be kept out.
Okay,
And so, I guess you could really say that about anything, that's temporary in those
Sure,
areas.
that makes
but
sense.
We would, yeah, we would expect people to have moved them.
okay, thank you.
Okay. See, I know I'm taking long. I'll try to
It's okay.
speed up here. So our flood maps, these are the tools that we use to manage our floodplain, development here in the city. FEMA created these maps, as I said. They issued them to the city, for us to use, with the charge that they've given us, which is to manage these areas. Our first flood maps, were issued in 1981. These were based on survey data, that was taken in 1978, is when FEMA's surveyors hit the ground to start this effort. We were provided a detailed study with flood elevations, 2 years later in 1983. And that's what really gives, teeth to what we're doing, because the maps draw lines on paper. You know, it's basically a street map, with floodplain and floodway lines on it. So you can tell generally in space where you are in relation to a floodplain or floodway, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what the elevations are. And so part of our charge is to make sure people that are developing at or above, our ordinance says a foot above, the base flood elevations in a 100-year event. So without the detailed study, it's kind of hard to do that. So the detailed study is what we still use, on a day-to-day basis to assign BFEs and to ensure that development is, taking place at the elevation it should. Our current maps were revised in 2010, but that was purely a map revision. That was essentially to get all of our street map background, of the floodplain, mapping up to our current, you know, geographical, development standard. Because, you know, back in the 80s, or back in the early 80s, back in 1978, when the data was taken, you know, a lot of, like, the north half of University Drive wasn't even there, you know, north of Austin. So, there were definite, road inclusions and stuff like that needed to be done. There were also some holes in the, mapping from the original maps that they needed to fill in certain areas, especially in some of these older parts of town. So, the maps were revised, but the data is still from 1978 survey, in the, you know, late 70s, early 80s survey data. So that's important to note. And so this is what our flood insurance rate maps look like. That's right downtown here. The hatched area in the middle of the shaded area is going to be our floodway area. And so, again, floodway being the area where we would expect moving water in a flood event. The shaded gray, darker gray, is our 100-year, and if you can see it, right on the edge there of the 100-year, just a thin strip on the outside, it's a lighter gray color. That's actually going to be our 500-year floodplain. And so, a lot of areas, I think, like Houston, use the 500-year to restrict development. We don't do that. We're mainly concerned with the 100-year. Okay, and so this is that same, map overlaying on our, GIS, software. And so we have these all online. Interactive application shows the floodway, floodplain data, with, the aerials behind it. And so you can flip through there and see where your place of business is and how it's gonna be washed away in the next flood. Or you can go look at your neighbor's property or whatever you wanna do. So it's interesting, but, it kinda gives a visual to where we have these, concerns. And spoiler alert, I mean, we do have a lot of tracks in these, floodplain areas, even in the, floodway areas. So, last count that I had was about 1,100 tracks within the 100-year floodplain. Again, that's okay, as long as, you know, they're protected. And that's what we make sure that they do, moving forward. But one interesting thing about this is, at least I find it interesting, maybe nobody else does, but with 1,100 tracks in the floodplain, there's only, you know, 100 or so policies in place with the National Flood Insurance Program. So we got a lot of tracks in the floodplain, but not a whole lot of flood insurance policies out there. So
Yeah, I find that interesting.
yeah, it is. And, of course, we don't, you know, we're not the enforcers on flood, you know, insurance or anything like
Yeah,
that. But,
banks are.
and even, you know, yeah, they are. And, you know, even, you know, properties that aren't, under, you know, a mortgage or anything like that, you know, if the lenders aren't, you know, making you have it, some people choose not to get it. So, I mean, that's your own risk, but interesting to me at least. So,
Yeah.
structures
make
in
you
the
do it.
flood areas, you know, we get asked a lot, say, specifically for like the Bonita Apartments or whichever ones are on Pearl Street, you know, that flood, fairly often in these events that we have. You know, why did y'all let them build there? Well, they were built there before we had these maps and things like that. So, I mean, we have, there were 332 buildings by our count, in these flood areas before these maps were even published. You know, we're in Nacogdoches, we were an old city, obviously, a lot of development before 1981. Fairly, I mean, 1981 to now is fairly recent when we're talking about Nacogdoches. So a ton of stuff already built, at that point in time. And then 144 structures were built, in the time frame between, when the maps were published and now. And so, maybe not 39, but anyway, those, you know, would be, structures that are still allowed in the floodplain, but they just were, permitted. And so, 52 buildings, were removed from the floodplain since 1980. And those are ones, some of them the city or others have taken out, and some of them were just, you know, they fell down or, you know, they were damaged and demolished, and they're not allowed to be built again in those, some of the floodway areas where they might have been. They could build them again in the floodplain, but. So the age-old question is, you know, should we allow development in the floodplain, period? Well, FEMA allows it. That's, you know, the number one answer there. But should we allow it? You know, we do have some discretion with our own ordinances, but we could choose to be more restrictive. But these are just a short list of some of the properties that are in floodplain areas. And you may or may not have heard these same names in prior, you know, floodplain discussions. But, you know, on the commercial side, most everything north of MLK on University is going to be within the floodplain area, especially on the west side of the road. There's more than 70 buildings in that area. Nibco, Texas Farm Products, Lone Star Feed, you know, down here, and several others. Several SFA facilities like the Coliseum. We've got a lot of parks, which is natural, you know, for low-lying areas like that. You would expect to have parks, but our soccer, softball complexes, you know, Festival Park, Bonita Park, and then city facilities there in blue. Our vehicle maintenance barn down here south of City Hall, the police station, City Hall parking lot, farmer's market, etc., are all in the floodplain. And then residences. We've got a lot of residences in the floodplain, especially in the older parts of town. We even have some that are in floodway areas, believe it or not. I mean, good or bad, it is what it is. They're there. They've been there for a long time, and so those would not be there either. But when we talk about, you know, whether we should allow floodplain development at all, aside, setting aside floodway development, right? I've already said we restrict that heavily. But floodplain development, anytime you talk about that, there are significant tax impacts, that are, related to these, buildings. If none of these were here, because we restricted floodplain development, that is a major, that's a major factor in our tax base. So, when we talk about these things, right, wrong, and different, I mean, we have to evaluate economic impacts. A lot of these developments not being here, what would our city look like if they weren't here? If we were not able to develop along University Drive, if some of these major industries weren't in the places they're in, what would Nacogdoches look like? And so,
You have property rights too. People want to
Property
do what they
rights,
want
yeah.
with their property.
Exactly,
So,
exactly. And so, the fact is, Nacogdoches, we're built on a ridge in between two creeks. Our city is built along two major creeks. And so we have to figure out how to work with where we are, and so, just any discussion on, modifying our floodplain, ordinance, or otherwise, it's a balancing act. So we need to talk about, the tax impacts and the development impacts, as well as, protecting our natural areas, so.
So to that point, Case, when we're talking about Bonita and the creeks, have the city, since the 2010 study, done any modifications for flood, water flow, in terms of channeling the creeks a little bit larger or doing anything like that?
No, we haven't done anything like that, nothing to, modify the creeks themselves. We've tried to keep them clear. We try to maintain them as best we can.
Just
And-
from debris, that's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Overgrowth, like how often does that happen?
Well, we've got, I think, maybe right now or fairly soon, we've got in the budget for rental of, a big trackhoe that we can get down in those creeks, and there's some fallen trees and logs and things like that our guys have been eyeing for a while. We don't have the equipment to get it, on hand, but, trying to coordinate getting a lot of that stuff removed where we know that it is, just to keep those channels clear.
Right.
And the water moving, because that's definitely plays into property damage when things get dammed up like that.
Right.
So, and even our current ordinance, talking about, tax impacts, among other things, and I had to write this down so I'd remember it, but, so I wouldn't, say it wrong, but, section 42-3, under the statement of purpose for the ordinance, says that we need to help maintain a stable tax base by providing for the sound use and development of flood-prone areas. So it's in the ordinance, currently, that we need to, be mindful of the tax impacts and development like that, so. Okay. Enough about that. So the maps can be changed, and there's a couple of different methods for that. One is called a LOMA, and just, from the beginning, let me just say that, the maps we have are very coarse. Survey technology back in 1978, much more coarse than the technology that they have today with LiDAR and things like that. So remembering that the maps and the detailed study and all that was based off this survey data, they did the best they could with what they had, but with the technology being coarse means we have maps that are coarse, right? And it is the Bible, but it is coarse. So it is what we have to go by, but it might not always be entirely accurate. And we've found that in places. But one way to do that is through a letter of map amendment. And if you can prove that you're out of the floodplain naturally, that doesn't mean you filled your way out of it, but if you're out of the floodplain naturally, in an area where it was shown that you were in the floodplain or the floodway even, You can prove that, and if you can, prove that and submit a LOMA to FEMA and they sign off on it, you can get your property removed from the floodway or floodplain. Now, they don't want to update their maps every single time because that's a major endeavor. But what they do is they will file a letter of map amendment, which effectively, acts as a revision to that map, basically saying you're not in that floodway or that floodplain area. See, here I am calling it floodway and floodplain, so it's kind of natural. But it isn't. So those changes are incorporated by letter. Good example of a LOMA is that I think it's called Chilnack, the daiquiri shop down here. It's actually in the floodway if you look at the map, but there's a hill there on that property, and so where they built it is actually above the base flood elevation, and so they were able to go through FEMA, get a letter of map amendment, and that property is not in the floodplain anymore, even though it shows it to even be in the floodway. So kind of interesting there. The other way to get the maps changed is through a LOMR F, letter of map revision based on fill, and that's when in that floodplain area, in the flood fringe area where you're allowed to fill, you have filled that property to the point where it is no longer in the floodplain. So it's above that 100-year flood elevation. And as an aside, to get a LOMR F, you do have to prove, when I say you, the property owner has to prove that there aren't any endangered or threatened species that would be impacted by that. So just an aside there on the LOMR F process. So a good example of a LOMR F is Lumberjack Lofts. They did a letter of map revision based on fill back before they developed, and so if you look at the map there, the light blue lines designate the floodway boundary. That hatched blue is the 100-year floodplain, 500-year again being the red. So the Lumberjack Lofts folks wanted to, they filled that yellow area and got it above the floodplain elevation, and then wanted to get a LOMR F, which they got. So they built on that, and I know it shows it in the floodplain, but that whole yellow area is actually not in the floodplain anymore. The letter of map revision excludes that. So now, and I know the map's the same, but if you were to plot it out on paper, that floodplain kind of jogs into the floodway line. You can see where that yellow line and that light blue line kind of coincide there. So it jogs in, then follows the floodway boundary, and then jogs back out to where the 100-year floodplain line is. So that actually, those apartments are not actually built in the floodplain according to the insurance.
So when they receive these LOMRs, do you guys update that on GIS at all?
No, not generally, but
Okay.
we do have them in our file.
Okay.
And I think they may have it as a query, and if you were to click on the property or something.
Cool.
But no, we don't. Ours strictly reflects the floodplain maps as we have them.
Got it.
But we do have all those kind of in our file.
Okay.
When we receive them back from FEMA. Okay, so floodplain management is one of FEMA's tasks, but they don't have the resources to manage it themselves, so they delegate that to local entities like the cities and the counties. And according to FEMA, if Nacogdoches wants to make available flood insurance for our citizens, there's a couple of things we have to do. One is adopt a floodplain development ordinance, which we have, and our ordinance mimics very closely, maybe even verbatim, a model ordinance that was handed to us by FEMA way back in the day. And so it's very, very closely reflective of a model ordinance that they gave us, which basically means it says what they want us to say. And so it protects the floodplain, it limits development. limits the height of development, and so forth. And all of this is about risk in their minds. So they want to minimize their risk as much as they can. So that's why they want us to pretty much restrict anything that's gonna raise their risk of having to, pay out. And so, we need to make it high enough to where it doesn't flood, essentially, is what they're all about. We also review and permit construction within flood zones, and then, we've got floodplain administrator, at the city. We basically handle any floodplain, requests that come in and, make sure they're going through the correct process. I missed a slide here. Oh, I'm on the right one, sorry. So just to summarize, I know I've gone long, I appreciate y'all's patience. But our city flood ordinance, paired with, us watching things, all the time, any permits that come through, we check to make sure they're not in the floodplain. If they are, we want them to go through the, permitting process, just to make sure everybody's, building at the elevation they're supposed to be building, and things like that. We are, trained, the engineering staff, we are trained in hydraulics, we understand flooding, and, we've got other technical staff, who are not in the engineering department, who are certified as floodplain managers, so. Several different folks that do understand hydraulics and, how to make things safe and to mitigate against some of these issues. It's not unheard of, but flooding damage here in Nacogdoches is pretty uncommon. Usually in the same areas like the apartments, on Pearl Street or places like that where we have historic flooding. But I think the main driver for that is the fact that we are making sure that new development is built where it should be built. Our local requirement, which is above and beyond FEMA's requirement, is that we build a foot above base flood elevation, which engineering assigns. We assign base flood elevations. But the foot above the flood elevation is, I think, what keeps a lot of these people away from the damage that they might have seen otherwise. And also, like we talked about, we do try to maintain our creeks and our streams as best we can. But one thing about Nacogdoches is that most, if not all, drainage ways are privately owned. Lanana Creek is not owned by the city. Bonita Creek is not owned by the city, except where we have property that fronts it, in which case we own half of the creek in that area. So it's actually a pretty inconvenient truth, but the city, most of the time, cannot spend private or public money on cleaning these drainage ways because they don't actually fall on city property. They fall on private property. And so it is imperative for folks to be, diligent on their own to help maintain their portion of the creeks that they own. Generally, property, and with some exceptions, they generally go to the center of the creek if you front a creek. And so if a tree falls from your property into the creek, generally that's the property owner's responsibility to take care of. So anyway, I've spent enough time. Happy to answer any questions that y'all might have.
Thank you, Case.
I have a last question for you. In terms of the city buying out areas of flood zones, it was proposed in that flood study. Has the city owned any properties, or they have the first right of refusal? It was a suggestion.
Which flood study do you mean?
It was the 2010 flood study.
Oh, that Klotz did?
Yeah, it was an alternate number 3 floodplain greenbelt. Greenbelt Creation Fund could be established to purchase these properties. Budgeting $1 million annually would allow the city to purchase approximately 12 properties per year. I'm assuming we haven't done that.
We don't have the
resources
funds to do that currently.
Right. And so one of the things that I do want to ask is, does the city own any of the properties at all in the floodplain areas?
Sure. Yeah, we own a lot of property in the floodplain area. All of our parks that are going to be in the floodplain area are city owned. We own.
And were those granted to us by somebody gifting it to us, like a?
I think in some cases, probably. I don't have all the history on all of them, but but I would imagine, probably some of them at least,
Okay.
if not all of them. But You know, we could delve into that more if you'd like an answer on that. I'd probably have to.
Sure, I'm just
I'd
curious.
probably have to get with Parks and Rec to kind of ferret that out a little bit. Unless
Absolutely.
Jerry's got some off the top of his head knowledge.
No, that's pretty, yeah,
I'm aware
you'd
of
have to
some
dig
of
into
those
that.
have been deeded to the city, but I couldn't tell you
Some
the
of
whole
them, the
history.
gifted and deeded. Yeah, that's what I figured.
We do have a lot of property on the north end of University on the west side that we do own, where a lot of our trails go through, the north
Right.
trail and
Right.
Schaffner Loop and all that. That's all city-owned property back in there. And so, yeah, we do own quite a bit of
So you're
property in
saying the
floodplain.
public can gift if they wanted to in the floodplain areas to the city?
That would probably be a matter for council to deliberate. They could probably ask the question, I would assume.
Well, thank you. This is very insightful. Thank you.
Thank you, Case.
Thank you.
Anything else from you? Okay. If there's not, hold on. Number 6, future agenda items. Commissioner may inquire about a subject for which notice has not been given. A statement of specific factual information or the resuscitation of existing policy may be given. Any deliberation shall be limited to a proposal to place the subject on an agenda for subsequent meeting. Is there anything else anyone would like to add for a subsequent meeting?
No.
We good? Okay. If that, we'll adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Time is 6:28.